Testing. careful. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular Governance Board Governance Workshop meeting for Adelanto Elementary School District. The time is 3:45. It is Tuesday, November the 12th, 2024. Section 1.02, call to order. Ms. LeVey, will you please take roll?
Trustee Stewart.
Present.
Trustee Turner.
Turner present.
Trustee Soto.
Soto present.
I'll take note that Trustee Webster is absent. Trustee LaFrench.
Love French present. Quorum has been established. Section 1.04, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Section 2, adoption of the agenda. Trustees, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Stewart, I motion to adopt.
Soto, I'll second.
Ms. LeVey, please take the vote.
Madam President, I just want to note that there were no proposed additions, deletions, and adjustments in order of business. I'll go ahead and I'll take the vote. Trustee Soto.
Soto, aye.
Trustee Turner.
Turner, aye.
Trustee Stewart.
Stewart, aye.
Trustee LaFrench.
Love French, aye. Section 3, motion passed, I'm sorry. Section 3, public testimony. Ms. LeVey, do we have any speakers?
I don't have any speakers, but I do have audience members, and I believe we do have ADTA in the audience.
Okay. Do I need to read my blurb?
Yes.
The public comment period is administered by state law and is the point of the meeting set aside for members of the public to share their opinions with the board. Open meeting laws do not permit the board to engage in dialogue or answer questions. Any person who wishes to address the governing board on open session agenda and non-agenda items only must complete a goldenrod speaker form and submit it to the assistant to the superintendent before the meeting is called to order. The Board of Trustees value public comments, and although the Board of Trustees cannot take action or discuss items not on the agenda, the Board of Trustees listen carefully and appreciate input from the public. Additionally, a public speaker can be cut off for exceeding the allotted time or for willfully causing an actual disruption to the meeting. Before cutting a person off or removing someone, the board will give at least one clear warning. If you were cut off or warned last time, please consider that your warning. Individual speakers are allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each open session agenda item. The board limits the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. With board consent, the president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public presentations depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. The president may take a poll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask that additional persons speak only if they have something new to add. Ms. LeVey, will you please call the audience member up?
Yes, the board would like to call on Jennifer Rader.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Walker, Madam President, trustees, and cabinet. I have many remarks in my ADTA board report to share with you later this evening, but right now I have more pressing questions. Why is this governance workshop being held today and now? It seems very premature. We are on the cusp of a new board configuration, not just a new board member, but a new president and clerk, not to mention the fact that everyone is not in attendance today. This information will surely have to be reprised in a few weeks at least. How much is this costing, with the attorneys giving the instruction for development of the board? Why aren't you waiting until after the election results are certified? And why for only an hour and a half of training instead of the typical several hours on a weekend? Also, there is no subject as to what will be discussed. Usually it's budget, academics, hiring, etc. It seems very odd that it's blank. We are watching, and we are interested in what business is being produced. I look forward to addressing you all again before the regular board meeting, as I have some really wonderful news to share, as well as accolades for a district that, current issue notwithstanding, I feel is on the cusp of real greatness, in a better direction than we have seen since the days before distance learning and COVID. I will see you all later this evening.
Ms. LeVey, do we have anyone else?
Madam President, that is all for tonight for this meeting.
Thank you. Section 4, staff reports and presentations. Dr. Walker? Okay. Section 4.01, governance workshop. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, members of the audience, and members who are watching this live stream from wherever you may be. So my name is Alan Muserino, and I am a consultant with Muserino and Associates, here providing governance professional development in the area specifically of effective governance, utilizing the policy coherence model and a variety of other models to provide a framework for the Board of Education to be as effective as possible. Today's work is a continuation of work that we started at the retreat. And I'll remind everyone, or tell those who don't know, that we did have a different interim superintendent at that time. So part of this work continuing is that since that time, we have Dr. Walker in the seat, number one. And number two, the continuation of this work is not it's not an event. This is ongoing, this process. Every time the board changes, every time there's reorganization, every time there's new leadership, succession, even new cabinets, this is typically revisited to ensure that everyone is on the same page. So today we're going to continue what we started at the workshop 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, which was developing a set of normative behaviors to guide the governance of this organization. When I refer to the governance team, I'm referring to the Board of Education and the superintendent, that board CEO relationship. And that'll continue to be the focus of this work. Obviously, as the leaders of this district, it's critical that everyone is on the same page. So let's begin the presentation here for everyone at home. Board, let me bring to your attention this presentation in front of you so that you could have a hard copy. And this is exactly what everyone will be watching if they are watching from wherever they are seeing this stream on YouTube. So the moral imperative, I don't need to remind this group. I've been working with you long enough to know that you do indeed take this responsibility as a moral imperative, entrusted by your community to serve. And that is a moral imperative, much like it is for Dr. Walker and everyone else in our industry. When you're in the kid business, when you're in education, it's a moral imperative. We are here to ensure that all of our students will have every opportunity to be successful. I remind you all of that, not because you need to be reminded, but that is important to be said. so that everyone recognizes that, well, our tasks are tall, we're equal to them as long as we do our very best. So governing for coherence. So here's our outcome objectives. One is to resolve to adopt a set of normative behavioral standards to guide board meetings and interaction amongst the governance team. So this is a next step in that process at some point, likely in an upcoming regular meeting of the Board of Education. There could be a resolution where the board will adopt these agreed upon standards. A second objective is to enhance collaboration, build unity, and strengthen governance practices by fostering high-performing, collaborative, and unified governance team. It sets the standard for the entire organization. One thing we know of all the variety of different levers that move school districts towards success, none are greater than collaboration. But before you could successfully collaborate, there has to be trust. And that's what this work is all about. It's about unifying as a governance team and building trust among its members so that we could focus on the work. Systemic coherence. I say coherence all the time. And you guys are probably saying, okay, here we go again with coherence. But that's what it's all about. But I want to be clear on what it is. I want to take you through it a little bit, especially for those who may not be familiar with the concept or those watching from home, because the term coherence is, you kind of say, well, he's clear. We understand what he's saying. He's coherent. And that is the root of the word. But when we talk about it in terms of systemic coherence for an organization, as you could see up there, system, okay? It's about the system. And systems really are only as good as each chain, each link in that chain. So if you think of the system as an overall link chain, think of each individual link. And if any one member or any employee or any part of the organization is not strong and that link weakens, it weakens the entire organization. So when you are looking at an organization from a systems perspective, and I know I'm sounding pedantic, but I'm a university professor, so I kind of get into that mode sometimes. But we want to look at this organization as a whole. Really, it's the sum of its parts. Okay, you're at the top of it. So as you function goes the entire organization. So the higher functioning that occurs in the highest places, that will eventually trickle down to where the work is done, which is in our classrooms, right? That's where we want effective governance to impact the ability of our teachers to be successful. Okay, so we want to make sure that the system is as strong as it possibly can be. The other term is coherence. And coherence is often thought of as alignment. You'll hear this description that there's kind of a through line that goes through the organization from top to bottom so that everything is all aligned. Board sets goals. The CBO and the superintendent and team work to ensure that there are resources to support those goals. And professional development helps to attain those goals and so on and so forth. Okay, but that's not necessarily coherence. That's important too. Clearly, you have to be aligned. But when you think of coherence, think of the emotional element of that process. Okay, alignment is rational. Coherence is not. Coherence is being on the same page, that the entire organization, the associations, a shared depth of understanding what it is that we want to accomplish. We could easily align, but that doesn't mean the organization is going to be coherent. Not until there's a shared depth of understanding about what our mission is, and everyone buys into that. Not going through the motions, buying into it, doing their part, each being a link in that chain. Okay, so coherence in the context of governance, it's all about policies. So from your perspective as a governance team, it's about policies. So standards for the board's own performance. That's why you did a retreat. That's why you did a board self-evaluation. That's why you continue your own professional learning so that you could constantly evaluate your own success. The board CEO relationship. As I already mentioned, it's important that the board and the superintendent obviously are on the same page. As the chief executive officer, it's critical that everyone is constantly doing this work, talking about what it is that you do. So there's never a better time. It has to be constant and ongoing. Operational expectations. So these are policies that establish how you're going to do things. So what system for evaluating employees, for example? What are hiring practices? What are resource allocations? How are you optimizing those for student success? Okay. So these are the operational expectations that the board puts in place. And then results. It all comes down to how successful are our students. So as you look through these 4 ideas, all of which are defined by policies, the board plays the most critical role in the organization, setting forth those policies. The superintendent or CEO is going to operationalize them and ensure that they are being followed. The board's focus is on student outcomes, results. Are children improving? Are student outcomes improving? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we doing the right things? Is our professional development aligned with the needs of the district, and so on and so forth? Okay, now to bring everyone back to a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, we went through a process whereby I asked the Board of Education to identify behaviors that speak to group behaviors that are not, in the sense of the word, functional. And the board took the time to go through and identify many dysfunctional behaviors that they may have observed or experienced at some point. Then later on in the exercise, I asked you to identify behaviors that are indicative of positive and high functioning group or teamwork. And you did that. Then the board looked at all of the behaviors that are not becoming of a high functioning board, and they paired them with those that are becoming of a high functioning board. And if you remember, you covered up every one. You had them all covered. So from that list, we went ahead and created these norms for the board's consideration to continue this work. So we let off on the last number, I think number 10. So what we want to do today is pick up from there. To the right are all of the behaviors indicative of high functioning boards and those indicative of low functioning, just for your information, so that you have that information. Okay, so now we're going to move on. So there's 5 major categories in governance. All of these norms and behaviors fall under these 5 categories. They are: trustees are not judgmental, trustees empathetically listen, trustees focus on content, trustees don't personalize differences, trustees keep moving forward, and trustees are true to their norms, which is kind of a extra one. Knowing that you've created these norms, now you have to adhere to them. Okay, so all of the behaviors that the board and the superintendent identified they all fit under these categories. So let's start here with trustees are not judgmental. So the first one, willingness to help fellow trustees. So these were all from all of you. So I'd like to get some help and participation in this part of the workshop. So who would like to volunteer to read that first one, willingness to help fellow trustees? Trustee Soto?
I can go, yep. Trustees with the governance mindset understand that making assumptions or holding on to a preconceived views of other trustees, particularly individuals with divergent philosophical and ideological points of view, can seriously undermine the ability to communicate.
Okay, so what I've done is I've taken your words, which was willingness to help fellow trustees, because I asked you for bullet points, and then aligned it with the actual policy or the actual language that would appear on a resolution or some type of document that would guide this work. So any questions on this? Any debate, discussion, agree, disagree? Again, for everyone here, both in the audience as well as those watching from home, we're not taking action tonight. Right, tonight is continuing discussion on these, and then in a continued either regular board meeting or another workshop, the board could take it to that next level, which would be, as I mentioned, a resolution. But today we want to continue to discuss and confirm that, yes, these are indeed norms that we would like to adopt, assuming the board agrees by consensus. So the first one, willingness to help fellow trustees. Discussion, debate?
I like it, I agree.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on. Know the board role versus the superintendent role. Who would like to read this?
Understanding the respecting the distinct roles of the board and the superintendent is essential for effective governance. It prevents confusion, enhances accountability, supports strategic focus, and fosters a productive and professional relationship. By adhering to these roles, distinctions, the board and superintendent can work together to create a strong, focused, and effective school district. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. So obviously, role confusion is among the most significant problems that governance teams suffer. As a superintendent myself in 2 different school districts, I recognize that there will be role conflict. And that's okay. It's not as though you're eliminating role conflict, but you have to have a system in which you could talk through it and agree on what some of the behaviors will be that are acceptable. Because when we first met during the retreat, if you remember, we went through about 20 different roles and responsibilities, and I asked the board to determine, is this a superintendent responsibility, a board responsibility, or both? And you remember what most of them were?
It was both.
Yeah, almost all of them. So there's going to be those conflicts. You just have to be clear on what the expectations are so that it doesn't become a disruption. Okay,
So I'm sorry.
yes.
So I have a question. So how could we be clear? So let's say we have a new trustee, you know, besides a trustee who's already there, like, is there like a list or guide, you know, like something printed so that we could say, here are our roles, and then from there, if there's disagreement, we could have discussion, because I do remember the checklist. I forgot though what was on there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so great question. So those would be protocols. So once the board accepts the norm that, yes, we do accept the fact that we need to be clear on our roles, then the protocols will explain what those are. Protocols might be, for example, when a board member wants to visit a campus. What's the protocol for that? With the superintendent, with a member of the superintendent's team, so on and so forth, right? So all of the HR related things, such as hiring. You know, some boards of education like to have a representative on the actual hiring committee. Others say, no, that's totally the superintendent's job. So those would be the protocols that would further define the norm. So
okay.
great question. And that would be for another process down the road.
Okay.
Because the board handbook has some of those, but it hasn't been revisited for a few years. So we certainly want to update those. Okay, so do we have agreement on this one?
Yes, I agree
Yes.
with that. I would like to add to that conversation as well. A lot of people in the community member and even new board members coming in think that their job is to run the district. That's the superintendent's job, is to run the day-to-day operations of the district. The board make decisions based on advice from the superintendent and based on the need of the district. So I just want to make that clear, and I agree with Trustee Stewart that even though all of the roles go hand in hand in some instances, the board do not run the district. The superintendent run the district. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Right, absolutely. And again, as a former superintendent, I greatly value that. The board doesn't want to put itself in a position where they're doing the superintendent's work, right? You want to hold the superintendent accountable to operationalize your policies. But sometimes the culture of different organizations and school boards is that there is more involvement, particularly in smaller towns. So it's just something to just be mindful of. And when those protocols are set, to make sure that everyone then is clear on them. Trustees empathetically listen. So this is the next major category. Who would like to read the first one?
Even the most aggressive trustee representing a minority view or opinion has important wisdom or perspective to offer. Be open to learning what the person is communicating.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, that was something this board has talked a lot about, right? Making sure that everyone feels valued, and that even if the opinion is different than your own, you respect it. And with the organizations that are divided by trustee area, which most districts are now, since you don't really see too many at large anymore. You know, sometimes you represent different communities as well, and so it's not that unusual that you might have different opinions on different situations. Okay, very good. Any discussion about that, or anyone object to that as being one of the norms for consideration? Okay. Next, engage in respectful dialogue.
I'll do that one. Oftentimes, the manner or behavior of a person, especially one who has not yet adopted a governance mindset, distracts from the substance of what they are saying. Remember to step back and be analytical so you can cut through issues of manners and behaviors to understand the core message being given.
Yeah. Right. So it takes time to acquire a governance mindset as well. Like you said, Trustee Turner, you got to know the role, right? But when you first get on a Board of Education, or sometimes even after a long time on a Board of Education, there is still conflict for one reason or another, particularly when there's turnover. Then it's even more typical that it might happen because of a leadership void. So that's not terribly unusual at all. Okay, any discussion or debate about this one? Okay, we're going to enter this one in as well. Okay, listen and wait to speak.
I think this is one that always is close to me.
Uh-huh.
It's always close to me because
Yep.
I try.
I
I
remember.
tend to jump in, but yeah, this is one that's close to me. I'll read it. Listening attentively and waiting to speak are crucial practices for school board members that significantly impact the effectiveness of governance. These behaviors ensure that all voices are heard, promote mutual respect, and lead to more thoughtful and inclusive decision making. By embodying these principles, board members not only improve their internal dynamics, but also set a positive example for the entire school community.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because you're models. You're the top model.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's watching. You're streamed on YouTube, so your behaviors will impact the rest of the organization. So this to me is critical because it really does show the respect that you each have earned as elected officials. So I'm assuming we're going to move forward with that one.
Yeah, that one is
Yeah.
very, very important. A lot of times you may want to say something, but you have to know your role, and someone else may not know their role, so they say whatever they want to say. But for me, I have to make sure that I continue to smile and know my role and
Right.
what I can and
Yeah.
cannot say.
Yeah, and as the board president, of course,
Even more.
you have the right. You also are presiding, so you
Mhm.
could politely ask a fellow member to wait to speak her or his turn.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, the next category is focusing on content. Who would like to tackle this one?
I'll read this one.
Okay, thank you.
Follow the Brown Act. Following the Open Meetings Act, Brown Act, is essential for effective and coherent governance. These practices ensure that the board operates legally, transparently, and in a structured, efficient manner, and fostering public trust.
All right, this is the quickest way to erode public trust, violating the Opens Meeting Act, and it's easier to do than some might think. Sometimes it's certainly not even intentional in a lot of cases, but being true to the Open Meetings Act really is a way to build trust with your community, and of course they elected you because they trust you in your position. So I'm assuming we're okay with this one. Okay. The next one.
Be honest with good intentions, integrity. Stay focused on content, not behavior or style. Ignore rhetoric.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I know that this was among the items that we talked about and embraced at the last meeting. You want to assume good intentions. You always want to assume good intentions. And if you stay focused on what the purpose is, be it taking action on an item or having a discussion, you kind of ignore some of the things that might otherwise bother you in some way. You believe maybe are intentional, but sometimes they're not intentional. They just may appear to be. So again, this is to me coming to every meeting with the highest level of integrity. And I watch your board meetings, and I believe that's exactly what I see when I witness it. So that's something that you could hold each other accountable for and continue to build that trust with the community. So we good with this one?
And that one is really hard because we hear a lot of rhetoric out there,
Oh, yeah.
and to sit here with a poker face is sometimes hard to do.
Yeah, people spin the narrative, right? And that rhetoric, and people believe it. And again, that's why the Open Meetings Act of discussing that in public is what has to happen. So the constituents are fully aware of exactly what the board is talking about. And you don't always have to keep a poker face, as long as it's, professional, you know. Just like, emotions, emotions are emotions, and they're okay too. All right. We're all human. Okay, continuing on the focus on content.
I can read that one. Be willing to commit to governance training, remain committed to deep learning and to understanding in depth the core issues of a moral imperative.
Right, and this is something I know you felt strongly about, Trustee Soto. Among the first things you wrote was continue to train, continue to go to workshops, CSBA, and all the sorts of things that are necessary. Much like you would expect your leadership team to have training, you expect your teachers to continue to get trained and have professional development. Same thing with the Board of Education. Certainly, by virtue of the work that the board's doing, you have committed to this, which I applaud you for. The next one.
Be respectful of the board as a governing body. It is okay to have many styles on a board, but there can be only one moral imperative.
Right. Got to act as a board, and that's right. So, individually, yes, you're all individuals, and you certainly bring your own perspective, given your constituents, trustee area, but you have to respect the work of the Board of Education. So when there's consensus as you move forward with whatever that consensus is as a unified team. So if the moral imperative is, say, if you'll agree on the fact that this is the work we are doing and we're acting in the best interest of our students to move the district forward and continue to evaluate our results as measured in student outcomes, then you recognize, okay, we're a board of education, not 5 individuals. We're a governance team, not 6 individuals.
I had a question or
Yes.
a comment, I suppose. What kind of came to mind was balancing having your own vote while also wanting to be united as a board. And I think that's kind of leading on to the next one, which is agree to disagree as a team. But
Yeah.
I guess I'm having a hard time trying to see a balance between being an individual trustee and also, of course, wanting to be collaborative and wanting to have a consensus or look united, I guess. So that's just a comment. I don't know if anyone can address that, but that's just a concern too, that perhaps would be kind of important to try and address if you want to find just yeah. Does that make sense or no?
Sure, absolutely. You don't give up your individualism when you are part of a team. You're bringing that perspective, and there might be situations, be it curricular, be it related to style or instructional materials. Could be a variety of different things that you simply do not agree with that approach, for example. It might be something like class size. You may feel strongly that all the evidence on class size, for example, does not suggest that it is a good investment of public funds. Others feel otherwise. Any teacher will say, yeah, fewer is better, right? But still, you have to make decisions based on the fiscal condition of the district as well. So that might be an example where you might you disagree. So you will vote or not vote for that. Same thing sometimes with people, with hiring, right? Sometimes you just do not agree and you get the opportunity to vote. Now that of course isn't going to be aired publicly on that in that case, but nonetheless, it's okay to remain who you are and be an individual on a board. It's really more about when the decision is made that you then support the Board of Education.
Thank you. I kind of put you on the spot there, I
No,
guess.
that's fine. No,
Thank
it's
you.
fine. Yeah, that's
I
a
wanted
great,
to add to
it's a
that
great question.
because I think that sometimes when we're having discussions, I think that when you're having the discussion, even though sometimes you go in and you say to yourself, oh, okay, I see it like this. I'm going to vote like this because it's my individual vote. And I can vote like this because I want to, right? Sometimes I think that when you have an open mind and you are as a one board and the information that is being given to you, sometimes that will um, have you look at things throughout a different eye lens than your own. And I think that when you're working together as a board, when it's 5 of us here, you're looking at everybody's perspective and they're bringing it to the table. In the end, yes, you may have, like you say, you may have, well, you might want 10 children in the classroom versus 30. What can we afford to pay for? How is that going to look? How many teachers do we have? So once you come up with a consensus of what's best for the district, then you're on that one accord when you come out in order to vote. I think that's taking everyone's perspective while you're there. And if you're openly taking everyone as being um, coming in from a good place, then it's no underhanding. This is my area, so I want this over here. Or you have an underlining reason for wanting your vote to be different than the rest. I think that collectively, when we communicate together as a group, we come up with those decisions together.
Yeah,
And then sometimes it falls off and it may be, 4-1 or we have 3-2 or things like that. It does happen. But I think that when we communicate openly and effectively with one another, then we're able to give reasoning on why you feel what you feel.
sure. And sometimes through the process, through the debate and discussion, you change your mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? You came thinking, this is how I feel about this right now, but you were convinced otherwise because maybe you didn't consider those things. So that's why, like you said, Madam President, if you assume good intentions, this person's coming from a place that is based on their perspective, based on their lens, based on their experiences. And now you can't deny their experience and you say, well, you know what, maybe I just didn't consider that because I don't walk in their shoes. So again, it's all connected. Again, back to the system, back to that system. Okay, so let's continue. The next category: trustees don't personalize differences.
Agree to disagree and act as a team. Stay grounded as a systems thinker with strategic focus. Remember the only behavior a person can control is his or her own. This can be admittedly challenging at times. We are all human, but the governance mindset requires it.
Yeah. So really, what we were just talking about, validating that idea that it's okay to disagree. Doesn't mean you're polarized. Doesn't mean you're on the opposite ends of history. You just don't see things in the same way, but that is okay. You still respect the will of the board, acting as a governance team. Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I would like to add,
Your
Yep.
mic.
my mic, okay. And this became an issue during COVID. There's a lot of trustees didn't agree on either the protocol, vaccinations or non-vaccination, and not only the trustees, it was the entire country, was divided on that. But what we did was adhere to the law, and even though some of us felt that the law was not just for everyone, we still had to operate within the system, even though we disagree with what was being brought to us as the law.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big one for me.
Yeah, it's a great point. COVID certainly divided
Did.
communities, boards, superintendents, and their boards. I was a superintendent during COVID, and much like you all, we pretty much had people on both sides of the aisle come to every board meeting, half supporting us and half not. But we did follow the law, but there were some districts that chose not to follow the law, and that set a dangerous precedent for those that chose to. That was a difficult time, but most boards and governance teams got stronger as a result of it, because they really had to say, okay, we know that this is unpopular, that we're going to be deciding, and we have to just stay together as a team, whether it's going to be masking policies or staff vaccination policies, or whatever they
Testing.
they may be. Yeah. So I think there may be a silver lining with COVID when we look back from that regard. Okay, hold itself and each other accountable.
I'll read that one.
Okay.
Irreconcilable differences or behaviors that repeatedly violate the agreed upon norms cannot be allowed to keep the board majority from doing its job. Nor can the board allow itself to become consumed by the situation at the expense of carrying out its critical responsibilities.
Yeah. So again, seems a little bit redundant, but it really speaks specifically to the board policing itself, not really the superintendent, but the board holding each other accountable. When I said superintendent, I mean the superintendent isn't the one holding the board member accountable. It's the board holding each other accountable. But there will be differences, and we just have to come to appreciate them and not take it personally. Okay, we're good with this?
I like that one. That one's an important one too. I think it's really relevant, especially the second sentence, which is nor can the board allow itself to be consumed by the situation at the expense of carrying out its critical responsibilities. So I think it's very relevant. It's important. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, without a doubt, because that's often what happens. You kind of lose sight of why you're here. What's the moral imperative to support your children? But when you start getting into debates and there's personality conflicts and problems, then that detracts from that work. And as we continue on, many of these norms speak to that same problem. It manifests itself in just different ways. Okay, one more on not personalizing differences. Who would like to read this one?
Engage with thoughtful questions. Do not allow issue differences to become weapons in personal disputes on the board.
Right. Yeah, so this was something the board felt strongly about too when we set these originally. Yeah, sometimes they become pointed and personal, and people could tell, right? So, but there are thoughtful ways to stay focused on the work so that it doesn't cross that line and become personal. Yes.
Also on that one, not so much now, but in the past, well,
and I bring it up because it could happen in the future. When a board member do not agree, then they go out and then they don't tell the truth about what really happened. And then the community or the staff get the impression that something else happened, and maybe in closed session or another situation where that really didn't happen. But the community get a whole different perspective of what that board member went out there and said. And that could be dangerous to the organization.
Yeah, and this is really where the self-policing comes in, because again, if the board does not have the trust of its community, it's going to be really difficult to optimize the work of the organization. It's just too disruptive. Everything is built on trust. And without trust, there's no relationship you're going to have, be it with each other, be it with the organization, or be it with the community. So it's very easy to lose trust. Earning trust, pretty difficult, but you could erode it just like that. Right? So that's why open meetings, Brown Act, making sure that all the discussions you're supposed to have in public, you are having in public, so that everyone hears, especially since you stream your meetings, everyone has the opportunity to know exactly what's going on. And there would be no conversation in closed, for example, that would be a counter argument, because that would not be an appropriate closed session discussion item, for example, because you follow the Brown Act. So everything comes together when you do things the right way, right? And when you do things the right way, then you get to do the right thing, right? Because you're not going to find yourself down that path. Okay, so we're good with this.
Mhm.
Okay, trustees, keep moving forward. How are we doing on time?
It is 4:37.
Right on schedule.
Okay.
Because we want to end by 5:15 at the latest, right? Because you have a 5:30. You start at 5:30. You need a little break. Okay, good. We're in good shape. Let's continue. Trustees, keep moving forward.
Okay, have agreed how to address non-normative behaviors. If the board has been fair in trying to resolve the differences over time, the difficult board member will receive little support from peers.
It's so assuming that all of the other norms are followed, where every opportunity for discussion, you're not personalizing things, you're allowing everyone to be heard, respecting everyone's opinion. And when in fact there is a behavior that does not adhere to the norms, it's addressed in a professional way, typically by the president and the board member, one-on-one. And if the behavior continues, then obviously you have a meeting again, and at some point you might need to adjudicate on the dais, so that the community is engaged as well. But the key here is fair. Going through this process, this is a fair process. So eventually, when the Board of Education is reorganized in December, and it's agreed upon what the norms will be, and it's not as though this can't be revisited again, then that's a fair process. And everyone recognizes, the board agrees, these are our standards for behavior, which we are going to adhere to govern and lead our organization. That's fair. So then when there is a lack of adherence, then you could deal with it, and only the board could deal with itself. Okay. Next one, prevent the gotcha moments.
Prevent gotcha moments that erode public confidence. Asking clarifying questions prior to the meeting is a best practice for a Board of Education whose members promote efficiency, transparency, and professionalism. It ensures that meetings are focused, strategic, and aligned with the principles of effective and coherent governance. By adopting this behavior, board members help create a well organized, respectful, and productive meeting environment that supports informed decision making and aligns with their governance responsibilities.
So the big thing here is that there's no surprises. So if a member is expected to vote, they need all the information. And you want to go into the meeting with the information. If you're not sure about something, you want to ask beforehand so that you don't put the superintendent and cabinet on the spot where they may or may not have the answer readily available. Not that they can't access it, but that, of course, takes away from the efficiency of the meeting. So the goal is for everyone to come prepared. And this is really under the come prepared to meetings. Okay, you do your homework. Okay, I'm not sure about this. You ask the superintendent. So when the action item comes up, there could be discussion and debate without having to get additional. And now sometimes something comes up in the course of the discussion where, gosh, I need to know a little more information. That's okay. That's going to happen. But to get in the habit so that the superintendent and her team aren't on pins and needles either. Because the gotcha moments erode public trust. They say, what's going on? The superintendent doesn't know this. Why'd you make the recommendation? Right? It just erodes trust in the entire organization. So it's so critical the board agrees to go ahead, and usually that's another protocol. So in other words, when should those questions be asked? I always like them for a Thursday meeting by no later than Monday. So if the board got the agenda the previous week, and on Agenda Online, you could look at any time, but let's say they got it on Friday, they had an entire weekend and Monday to read it. And if they had questions, they would let me know by Monday afternoon. And then my team has a couple days to get back to them so that they have all the information they need to make an informed decision. So again, another example of how the protocols are built off the norms, but it starts with the norms. Okay. Okay. So everyone's good with that? Okay. Also under the heading, trustees keep moving forward, Parliamentary Proceedings Act.
Following parliamentary procedures is essential for effective and coherent governance. These practices ensure that the board operates legally, transparently, and in a structured, efficient manner, fostering public trust and supporting the board's commitment governance principles by demonstrating accountability, respects the rights of stakeholders, and provides a strong foundation for responsible decision making.
Right. So you don't use Robert's rules. You use Judge Rosenberg's rules, right? Yeah, but same thing basically. Right. So parliamentary proceedings, which keep the board work, the business of the board moving forward. Really, it starts with the president, obviously, who's presiding over the meeting to make sure that there's a flow and it's efficient, and that there are not the level of disruptions that could potentially get people off course. Hello, Trustee Webster.
Hi, how are we?
Nice to see you again. Welcome. Okay, focus on the mission of student success. Who would like to read this one?
If all else fails after many attempts to accommodate the views or behaviors of a given trustee, it is important for the board to move forward in fulfilling its governance responsibilities.
Questions, comments on that one?
I like the part that this one is trying to attempt to accommodate the views and the behaviors of a given trustee, so they have a different given view.
Sure.
they can try to accommodate that. So I just like that language.
Yeah, and as long as it keeps, I know it's a cliche, but as long as it keeps getting back to the children and we continually remind ourselves or each other. So sometimes the discussion may take a turn, and that's okay. It's going to be emotions, it's going to be different perspectives. It's okay. We're tolerant of those and respectful, but we always want to get back to why we're here. What's our mission? And is this in the best interest of students? Not only the discussion and debate, how it's going, but also the ultimate outcome, which is you're taking action on an item, which is the business of the board, and the message that that sends to everyone in the community. Okay, so any question or discussion on that one? Any further? Okay, we're going to continue. This is also under the heading of trustees keep moving forward. Madam President, you want to read this
Another
one?
one of mine, yes. Structure meetings to adjourn by 8 p.m. Focus will diminish and community participation will lessen later in the evening.
Yeah, you lose
Yes.
viewers, obviously, and
You lose trustees.
yeah, people
9, 10
are
o'clock, I
tired.
start
You
to
got
fall
children.
asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been blessed in that in my superintendencies we never really went, but we had an 8:30 rule, and if it was going to go past that, the board would have to agree to go past it, and typically it was because of an action item that was a statutory requirement that we had to get done that day. So they would agree and vote on it. We do that item, and then we'd move everything else to the following week. So sometimes this takes restructuring your agendas. Sometimes one meeting a month isn't enough to accommodate it. Sometimes you just have to look at how you go about the business of the board. In other words, what's on consent. Is an item appropriate to be on consent, since that doesn't take a lot of time? There's no discussion typically, unless something's pulled from it, but for all intents and purposes, that's a one vote for a lot of items. So you have to make some discussions, but if this is something the board eventually decides to adhere to, then definitely have to sit down and decide, okay, how are we going to build an agenda that will allow us to get our work done and have the meaningful discussions that these items deserve and still end in a timely manner.
I like the 8:30. I don't know if we ever had it, maybe one or two since I've been on the board, or we finished by 8 maybe. I don't know if I'm. So I don't know how
I've been here
realistic.
6 years, and I'm telling you, it's only been a few. How much I wish that these meetings would end at 8 when you have to get up at
Yeah.
4:45 the next day.
Yeah.
And the extensions to say, can we extend it till 9:30, 10:30? I mean, we've been here as late as after 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
I just don't seem to understand why is it that we just can't get in closed session, do what you need to do. You've already read everything, come back out and be at home by 8 o'clock. I look at many board meetings on YouTube, other places, and I've even said that we should go visit, some of the surrounding areas. There's no reason to be here this late at night, and then to say at 9:30, oh yeah, let's have it go again. And once again, sometimes I feel as if there's things that's on there that could wait, or I just don't understand after 6 years of being on this board why we have to be here this late at night. It's just too late. By the time 10 o'clock comes, or 9 o'clock comes, I should say, that my focus is diminished because I've been up since 4:45. Even for today, if I leave work at 3:15, I'm here by 3:30 to get here. So I have not even had enough time to drink anything, right? And then I'm gonna go on from 5:30, So not to have it keep closed session is it. I can have time clocks. I could write it down. I can say, you have 10 minutes, you have 5 minutes, you have 15 minutes. Some kind of way it still goes off course. And I think I'm very good with time management. I could say, you only have 10. Okay, 9, 8, and then people just keep talking. I'll say, okay, now you only have 10 minutes. Okay, now I'm gonna write it on the board. Now the clock is gonna go off, beep, beep, beep. And guess what? People will continue to talk because they have something else to say. And then you have to respect the fact that someone else has something else to say. But at what point do you say you had 10 minutes, that's all you have? You as an individual should respect that 10 minutes and say, I'm gonna get what I have to say out in 10 minutes and let it go and not take 30 minutes to say what you have to say. We would go a lot faster.
Yeah, efficiency comes in many forms, but ultimately you have to structure the meeting in such a way, because you don't want to have an action item, something important, uh, not get addressed, because that sends a terrible message as well. So you have to sit down when you plan your agenda, and this could be done with the Board of Education in preparation for that, and determine how we want to structure meetings. So much of it has to do with what you could do at specials. And we're not going to get to the governance calendar this week, but when we talk about that, a lot of boards have one regular meeting a month, and then they have one special a month or study session a month. Those are where they have schools come and present. Those are the meetings where departments will come and talk about the work that's being done. That's to update the board on new practices, new policies, professional development, to keep the board in touch with what's happening on the operational side of the house. The regular meetings basically are the meetings that attend to the business of the Board of Education, but also send those important messages to the community and to your staff that we're efficient. We're running a major multi-million-dollar organization, and we're doing so in a way that is effective and efficient. So before moving to this, if the board decides to move in this direction, we got to really take a look at kind of deconstruct how they currently are addressing these items that are going to 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock. But in general, all the other norms that we've looked at become more difficult to adhere to at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. You're tired, frustrated. It just doesn't lend itself to good governance, without a doubt. Okay, trustees are true to their norms. So again, this isn't a category in itself as the other 5 are. This is the understanding that don't set them if you're not going to be true to them, right? Because that's another way of eroding trust. So if it is a decision that the board moves forward with at some point, resolving to adopt governance, normative behaviors for governance, then agree and be true to them. Okay, who would like to read this one?
Have agreed to norms and protocols to guide behaviors. It is at times of stress and difficulty that norms and protocols are most important. Treat every trustee with respect and demonstrate the core values of the board.
Yeah, that's why you need them, because you go through rough times. I mean, let's face it. You talked about COVID, Trustee Turner, and no one was ready for that. So that's why it's so critical, knowing that there will be ups and downs, there will be challenges. You have those norms, you agree to them, and then you self-police to ensure that everyone feels valued and respected, but that you're able to do the work of the board. So last time we talked about what adherence to the norms is absent. So if in fact, so boards of education that have had members who were disruptive and refused to act as a team, it's really just censorship legally. That's really the only thing, is to resolve, to censor. That's really the only thing you truly can do. You hope it never gets to that, because that in itself, of course, is divisive. But typically, the board president will address the single member behavior. If two members, for example, or three members are acting in the same way relative to a norm, the board president can't talk to them all, because that in itself is a meeting, and that would be a violation of the Brown Act, right? So it has to be one-on-one. And you hope that the one-on-one discussion resolves the problem. If multiple members fail to address the same norm, this third item here, again, you have to do it publicly up on the dais, because it is a meeting once. Because even if it's two people and it's the same issue, you have to assume that they may interact, in which case now you have a serial meeting. So again, you could unintentionally violate the Brown Act. You got to be really very careful about that. Probably not a bad idea also to go through some Brown Act training, just as a reminder at some point as well, because sometimes, again, you do it without thinking. The last one, if the behavior continues, public discussions at regular meetings continue, ensure the public is aware of the behaviors. Because ultimately, you've seen in some cases, most recently in some of the boards in Orange County, Riverside County, where candidates were recalled because of the behaviors did not represent the community, and that's not what the community had originally entrusted the board member to do. That's disruptive too, right? So you hope that as professionals, as adults, as those entrusted with the children of the city of Adelanto and the families, that you could figure it out and agree to disagree if necessary, but move forward doing the work of the Board of Education. There's a sample resolution just so you see what this eventually will lead to. So this is 4 pages. So it's just a standard resolution, but it speaks to all the things that we discussed. So this is just an example, obviously. When the board continues this conversation and agrees, yes, these are the ones that we want to resolve to follow, or we may make an adjustment here or there. Eventually, my recommendation is that you adopt this resolution formally and make it clear to the public. These are the expectations. Protocols are different. Protocols are internal. But this is what you are telling the public is how you lead, how you govern, and how you will effectively continue to support your particular trustee areas. Okay, so that concludes the presentation. It's 4:58. So there's a little time for questions or comments, or
How would you describe the difference between like a protocol and then adopting something like this? Just because there are some in this resolution where probably additional more detail would be kind of appropriate, but I guess I'm trying to figure out if that would go to the protocol section of our handbook. So I'm just trying to figure out what would be the difference, and would it be more appropriate to try and figure out where we would put it during the protocol handbook, or add it onto this resolution?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about some of the protocols, for example, under the responsibilities of the board versus the responsibility of the superintendent. So the norm is that the board will respect the roles of each The superintendent will respect the roles of each. The board governs, the board sets policy, superintendent of schools operationalizes that policy, keeps the board informed. So a protocol would be, what information do you want and when do you want it? Do you want a Friday update? So that wouldn't be a norm, that would be protocol. So superintendent of schools, so I would always do a Friday update, for example. So all the information that the board should know about, and we agree on what those things are. Same thing with emergency communications. What's the protocol? When does the board want to be informed? If you're visiting schools, can a trustee visit a school on their own, or should they be accompanied by a superintendent, for example? So all of those norms, there's protocols that would be kind of subcategories that would speak specifically. You could kind of call them indicators. It's like when you set goals, and then there's a number of indicators that are indicative of, are we moving towards those goals or not? So the protocols are internal and very specific.
Like procedures, you could
They're procedural.
can summarize. Okay.
Yeah, they're procedural. There's still behaviors. Everything's a behavior, but how you're communicating with is a perfect example. Okay, because one of the big problems that boards often encounter with their superintendent is equal information. So typically the superintendent communicates with the president of the board, and they set the agenda, right? So the president of the board communicates with board members, and so does the superintendent. So protocol would be how those communications will be set forth so that no board member has information the other does not. That's a common problem. Well, I didn't know that. Well, why didn't I know that? Boards all entitled to the same information and around the same time. Obviously, the board president is going to be more engaged and has a responsibility as well as communicating certain things. But for all intents and purposes, it's being very, very specific. So you got to be clear on that, and superintendent needs to have clarity. Okay, so if there's a situation, this happened at a school, there was a threat at a school, for example, okay, is that automatic? Will that go out to all board members, or does it depend on the extent of the threat? Right?
We're generally all contacted by the superintendent.
Yeah.
Any activities that goes on in our schools,
Right.
our superintendent immediately inform the board, the entire board.
Right, and is that via email? Is it via text?
Text message.
And is it to everyone at the same time and so forth? So, but these are all protocols that, again, you should all agree upon. That also becomes part of the superintendent's evaluation. So at some point, you're going to hold the superintendent responsible for following through on all your operational expectations. So known as the OEs, the operational expectations. Here's the things that we expect the superintendent of schools to do. And then there's going to be indicators that she did those things and in a timely manner, so that the evaluation is not your feelings. It's concrete. That's not to say that you don't get the opportunity during an evaluation process to express how you feel or how someone made you feel. But when it comes to actually evaluating the effectiveness of agreed upon behaviors, that's something that's written down, and the superintendent has clarity on what those expectations are. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you. And just so I could actually for sure understand it, for the listen and wait to speak, for example, if we want to add that in order to speak, you have to raise your hand, that would be a protocol, correct?
Correct. That would
Okay,
be
cool.
something that the board could put in place. The board chooses to put in place. So that would just extend that.
like on the because I'm just trying to see where we would put that, if that would be considered part of the resolution or part of the protocol handbook, because it's a procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be procedural, so that you could agree to do that as a matter of course, because you feel as though that would help to get everyone in the habit, and then eventually you might not need to anymore. But that would not necessarily be a norm, a normative behavior. The normative behavior is that you listen attentively and then you wait your turn to speak. If the board chooses to do a hand raise or some other way of indicating that they would like to speak, then that's fine too.
Can I just add to that? I think what basically the things that you're asking about, more specificity, is what will go in the handbook.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Correct.
So the norms speak to the overarching expectation. When you start talking about specifically going into detail, then you're going to put those things in the handbook.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I was going to say that we have a handbook. It hasn't been updated, and I don't think we updated it this year. But
No.
we do have a governance handbook.
No, in 23, it was revisited at your then retreat, but I don't believe there were many changes that I was able to see. So, and plus, there's a million things in there. It's like a strategic plan in some cases. It's so thick, it sits and collects dust. It doesn't drive any behaviors, right? So it's just not realistic. So remember when we first met during the retreat, I gave you an example of the handbook, that my proprietary model, that it's simple. It's again, you could go through and agree on what these behaviors will be. But again, there's perfection isn't the goal. The goal is unity. The moral imperative to act in the best interest of this organization, which you know will be more successful if you guys figure out a way to work together. It's the best interest of kids. All those little things will kind of work themselves out, and if you have to have some of those procedures in place, just like in the classroom, you might start off with kids having to raise their hand before they talk, but eventually all they need to do is look your way, or you have other ways that you communicate with the students that aren't as disruptive as that. So again, that should evolve, like any relationship evolves as you get to know each other. And then you realize nuances, and there's things that, okay, now I understand, that makes sense to me. So maybe I'm not going to personalize this, or I'm not going to personalize that. You're here for the kids. I know it's cliche, but after 4 decades of leading schools and districts, cliche or not, it's easy to lose sight of that mission. It just is. We live in a political environment. That's just the world, especially since COVID. So the unification of this team is what matters most.
Thank you, Dr. Miserino, for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so that concludes my presentation, Madam President.
Well, thank you. We definitely appreciate you being here. Adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Webster, I motion to adjourn.
The time is 5:08. Ms. LeVay, will you please take the vote?
I need a second.
So do I'll second.
What time is it?
5:08.
Madam President, it is 5:08, but I also want to just let, for the public to know that Trustee Webster did join the meeting at 4:43 p.m. I'll go ahead and I'll take the vote. Trustee Soto?
Soto, aye.
Trustee Webster?
Webster, I.
Trustee Turner?
Turner, aye.
Trustee Stewart?
Stewart, aye.
Trustee LaFrench?
Left French, aye. Motion passes. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.